Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining our City of Calabasas conversation on race and change. We are having some technical difficulty where our City of Calabasas website is down and most of the public was accessing our Zoom session through the City of Calabasas website. So if we are sending a notification out citywide, and it has been posted on social media, but thank you everybody for being a part of this. This is the start of a very important conversation and one that we should have been having a long time ago. I'm just going to read some short comments, and some of these I shared at our last council meeting, but since this is a different group of people and more members of our community, I wanted to restate my thoughts. So I have only been mayor for a short time, 28 weeks ago. And in that time, it seems like it's been forever. So much has happened to us in these short 28 weeks. We had a terrible helicopter crash in our city, a global health pandemic, putting our residents and community in harm's way and paralyzing our economy. Our city manager resigned, and there were nationwide protests over policing and racism. And we had 3 such protest marches in our city, all of them peaceful and organized by the youth in our community. All of us on the city council, there are 5 council members, put out a joint statement 3 weeks ago condemning the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis and reaffirming that racism has no place in the city of Calabasas, none. It is something that we will not tolerate. Each of us on the council and in all the city leadership looks at diversity as strength, not as a weakness. We support diversity of thought, diversity of culture, and diversity of background. We believe this makes for a more complete community. I'm so pleased that this is the start of our conversation. I'm very appreciative that each and every one of you have given your time to join us today. Joining today, I believe, are all of my council colleagues, and I just want to thank them: Mayor Pro Tem James Bazagian, Councilmember Mary Sue Maurer, Councilmember Fred Gaines, and a part of the conversation today is David Shapiro. Also wanted to thank our city clerk, Marisela Hernandez, and our communications director, Michael Russo, for helping put this together today, and our interim city manager, Ray Taylor. So with that, I will introduce Councilmember David Shapiro.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and thanks to everybody for being here. I am so proud to be here today, proud of the Mayor's Youth Council and Adam for leading this effort along with our city, and I'm very proud of all the panelists who are here today and everybody who will be part of this conversation and taking part in this as things get a little better technically. About 5 weeks ago, if I asked you if you knew the name George Floyd and others, no one on this call would likely have raised their hand. But on May 25th, 2020, all of us learned the name George Floyd. After watching 8 minutes and 46 seconds in which we all saw George Floyd killed, this country, the world, sparked a call for change all over. Our Mayor's Youth Council, led by Adam, you'll hear from Adam in a minute, our city, led by Alicia, myself, staff, and all, work together to create this positive conversation with our community about change today. Martin Luther King once said, "The time is always right to do what is right." I'm very excited to listen, hear, learn, and discuss tonight with our panelists and community about things we can do better for change in the future. Thank you very much. And I'm thrilled, I mentioned him twice already. We have the president of an organization started just last year, our Mayor's Youth Council, with over 50 members from 14 to 21 in our schools all over, who are really at the forefront of bringing change forward in all aspects of life. So my pleasure to introduce Adam Jason.
Hello, my name is Adam Jason, and I'm the chair of the Calabasas Mayor's Youth Council. In the past few weeks, I've attended several student-run calls on racism and the need for change in our community. I learned so much from each call and every speaker. However, what I recognized was while the students were speaking, there was a need for the adults in our community to be part of the discussion. This community panel was created to keep the conversation open and affect change. I want to thank all the panelists for their commitment to this discussion. Also, I would like to thank the members of the Mayor's Youth Council who submitted questions. Finally, Thank you, Mayor Weintraub, Councilman Shapiro, Marisela Hernandez, and Michael Russo, who helped make today happen.
Thank you so much, Adam, and you've been a tremendous asset to this. And the minute I reached out to you, if the Mayor's Youth Council would help with this, you jumped right on board. So thank you for your leadership. Now I would like to introduce our panelists today. And when I introduce them, they're going to tell us what organization they are from. First up is Layla Drew.
Hi, I'm Layla Drew. I'm a TV, film, and stage actress, and I was a student at Calabasas High School with a focus in performing arts up until my junior year. And I'm very excited to be on this panel today.
Thank you. Ty Fleming.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ty Fleming. I am a senior at Viewpoint School, and I am the co-president of my school's BSU. Thank you guys all for being here today.
Thank you. Sami Mehti.
Hi, I'm Sami Mehti. I'm a current student at Calabasas, going to be a senior, and I'm excited to continue the conversation.
Aneta Oguniji.
Hi, my name's Aneta Oguniji. I went to Calabasas High School. I graduated in 2019. I was on ASB for 2 years, and I was president of the Black Student Union for 2 years as well.
Thank you. Sienna Robero.
Hi, I'm Sienna Robero, and I'm an incoming senior at Calabasas. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Great. Leah Winter.
Hi, my name is Leah Winter. I'm going to be an incoming senior at Calabasas High School as well. I was just elected ASB president, and I've been on ASB for the last 3 years as well.
Great, thank you, Leah. Audley Harrison.
Hi, I'm Audley. Excited to be here. I'm from the UK. I'm a Calabasas business owner, live in Westlake Village, and I'm also an Olympic gold medalist athlete, and excited to be part of this conversation.
Great. Al Harrington.
Hello, my name's Al Harrington. I'm a Calabasas resident for 6 years now. Also entrepreneur in the cannabis space and a former NBA player of 16 years.
Great, thank you. Dan Stepanowski.
How you doing, Dan Stepanowski, Superintendent of Schools for Las Virgenes, 20-year resident of Calabasas. Thanks to the Mayor and Council for hosting this.
Okay, LaRonda Greats.
Hi, LaRonda Greats, representing Viewpoint School. I'm the Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Life at Viewpoint, and I send best wishes from Mark McKee, my head of school, who was double otherwise engaged this evening. And I'm really excited to be here and participate in this conversation.
Chuck Becerra.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chuck Becerra, the captain of Malibu Law School Sheriff Station, 25-year resident of this community, 2 daughters, one in high school, one in college. Excited to be here, and actually really excited to hear your perception of this station.
Great, and Marisela Hernandez.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marisela Hernandez. I go by Mari. I'm the city clerk of the city of Calabasas. I've been on my job for almost 8 years, and I'm very happy to be here participating with all of you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We're going to jump right into our questions, and leading off asking our questions is Adam Jason. And just, sorry, before we go on, there will be time for members of the community to ask questions. So please ask those questions in the chat box, and I will receive those, and so that we can ask those to our wonderful panelists. So turning it over to you, Adam.
All right, for our first question, Aneta, as the former ASB Commissioner of Clubs and Multicultural of Calabasas High School, what do you think is the best and appropriate way for schools in the Calabasas community to celebrate Black History Month?
Thank you for the question. I would firstly like to point out that the phrasing of this question is already limiting Black history to 1 month, the shortest month of the year, when Black history is the history of America. American history and Black history are intertwined. During my 4 years at Calabasas High School, I was not taught anything specifically about Black history. For a school of Calabasas High School's caliber, why are students graduating without learning about Black culture? I was not taught in English classes or history classes, and that is utterly disappointing. When you teach about American literature and American history and disregard the experiences of Black people, you are unconsciously whitewashing the history of the United States. Black history is not limited to sports and entertainment. Black history is the contributions of Black individuals in terms of agriculture, medicine, literature, governance, music, and science. Black history can be seen in the inventions of the ironing board, the home security system, the 3-light traffic light, and refrigerated trucks, among so many other inventions. One way for the school to celebrate Black History Month is to invite a Black scholar to speak to the school during Black History Month. It should be a mandated assembly for all faculty, staff, and students where they learn about Black history and how to practice being anti-racist. Secondly, Calabasas High School should implement the teaching of Black authors in all English classes. In every history class, there should be a specific unit focusing on Black history and the contributions of Black individuals in this country. The Black experience should be integrated into the teachings of history, literature, psychology, economics, in addition to others. There are 7 public schools, 3 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 1 high school in the city of Calabasas. We as a community need to commit to teaching students about the richness of Black culture and the Black experience throughout their educational journey.
Thank you so much. Adam, do you want to ask the next question?
Of course. Sammy, what words or actions are off limits for white people?
That's a very weighted question. And it's very nuanced in different aspects of context, for example, and what is and isn't appropriate to say in regard to the situation. I have had this discussion with a lot of people in regard to books such as To Kill a Mockingbird, Huckleberry Finn, etc., and the conversation of banning either the book or the references of the N-word in said book. And it really, the counter argument for the should we ban the book, should we not ban the book, is erasing history. And I feel like we must preserve history in regard to the ills and the pitfalls of America, but we should erase said things from our vocabulary and how we express those things today, and shift from, well, we are going to preserve history as a way to continue to say these adverse things, but instead graduate from that end. I'm not going to say this, but I'm still going to acknowledge that it's there. So I believe that we must continue to preserve these things, preserve what is our history, but adjust for the time that we're in. So to bring it back to the question, I think there are things like the N-word that in any context besides acknowledging history, it should not be used. There are words like coon, that's something you can't use. Off the top of my head, there's also, it's difficult. It's very difficult, and there's a lot of nuance to it. And just to get down to it, just ask a Black person, ask a Native American person, ask a Latino person what words are appropriate, because at the end of the day, it's about adjusting for the individual that you are in proximity with. And if someone says, hey, this is not something that I like to hear, or something that I do not want you to use, adjust to that and not use it. It's simple as that.
Thank you. Next question will be for Sienna. Or do you still have more questions, Adam, for Sammy?
Yes, we have more questions for Sammy. Sammy, recently you raised many questions on a Zoom call. How can the community as a whole help on these issues? Can you summarize the ideas that were brought up on your Zoom call?
Of course. My Zoom call was not limited to race. It was expanded upon a bunch of issues, sexual assault, mental health, et cetera, et cetera. And I think a lot of the general consensus was to sway the opinion of the collective and try to eliminate the stigmas that come with certain subsects of different communities. For example, the mental health community, there was a person who discussed their depression and how it was generally discounted, and a lot of it was just treated as it wasn't as big as the person was letting on. So I feel like a lot of education in regard to depression, mental health would be very beneficial to eliminating those stigmas. As someone else said, Black issues, just the education of learning what is right and what is wrong, or the historical context of different things, that'll large in part eliminate a lot of the stigmas that come with that community. And just the big focus in that Zoom call was education and learning about these different subsects of groups and understanding the intricacies and the nuances that come with that.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sammy. We really want to continue the change and continue to educate our community. That's why we set up this community panel. All right, Sienna, do you feel students of all backgrounds are treated equally?
I'm gonna have to say no on that one, just because people talk about how our generation is getting better, and that's a false understanding that, you know, racism is going away, because it's still happening all the time heavily. And, you know, I feel like it's coming from their own house. But me going to Calabasas, 3 years that I've been there, I've felt that my self-esteem has been lowered just because of the color of my skin. And, you know, they like to just make me feel as if they're better than I am just because of the color of my skin. And, you know, I had this one time in history class where someone on our Zoom meeting said colored people, and the history teacher didn't correct them at all. And I had to go out of my way and email my history teacher to tell him that that's not okay, and that we should be educating people that you can't say that anymore. And I think that just shows that there's an inequality when it comes to being Black in this community. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Sienna. I know these are it's a hard topic and hard questions, so just really appreciate everyone's honesty and willingness to be a part of today.
Layla, as a high school graduate, upon reflection, who would you have liked to have as a resource and advocate to speak to regarding problems on racism?
Thank you. To start, I would like to preface this by saying that I am not a graduate of Calabasas High School. I graduated from online school because I left the school due to racism and inequalities that I faced. So that's a complicated question for a few reasons. A majority of the racial abuse I experienced was from the leaders, the teachers of the school, and it further encouraged the students to follow suit. So let's start there. When I think about who I wish I was able to talk to, in reality, if there was a person, say a brown teacher or counselor with skin like mine that I could go to, they would have had to be a fierce advocate to combat the horrific things going on in the school. And they would have had to challenge their coworkers time and time again. And, you know, as a society, we've seen this before. Generally, when new employees come into a workplace solely for representation purposes to be the token people of color, they're ostracized, and either because they're different or because they're challenging the norm. Based on the school's history of keeping a hush-hush attitude at the expense of their students, the kids themselves have been ostracized and accused of creating trouble when bringing up race issues. A student via the Black at Calabasas Instagram page has said, "I learned about how systematic racism works at Calabasas. The staff subliminally teaches it to the entire student body." Another student from the class of 2018 said, "A faculty member called me a liar for trying to expose a racist teacher. He threatened expulsion and not graduating if I didn't, quote, drop the issue and stop causing problems." if it's like that for the students, what could these advocates of color really have been able to do when it's just one or two people against the status quo of the school? So to answer that question, no, I don't wish that I had someone to talk to just so that I could have my trauma or concerns ignored by everyone else there. Because with the current authority figures who were there when I was there and are still there today, I have more than enough reason to believe that there would just be more pacifying and a lack of concrete change. And we need to keep that in mind moving forward. The question isn't who can I talk to about racism so that I can cope with it. The question should be, how do we eradicate racism, period? The school's history of inequality is so well known that when you look up Calabasas High School racist, the term auto-completes itself in Google. I think we need to seriously reevaluate some of the positions at the school, because without that, we're not going to have any real change. And I say this with the most severity. With the direction we're going in as a country and as a people, if we don't see substantial changes made today, there are going to be devastating consequences moving forward. And I know at times it can seem like we have our own bubble here and what's out there will never touch us in here, but that's an illusion. Racism has been and is going to be even more loud and blunt. People are going to get hurt, kids will be hurt, and it'll be our fault as a community. Change can be uncomfortable, but we have to be loud and blunt in our response, and we have to do the work now. And I really encourage everyone to check out the Instagram page, Black at Calabasas, for more insight about what students are facing on the daily at the school. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to allow Councilmember Shapiro to ask the next round of questions. And again, to all of the members of the community, and we have about over 140 people participating. If you have any questions that you want to ask our panelists, please submit them through the chat. David?
Okay, thank you. I'm so impressed with this panel. Thank you, everybody, for being here and speaking up. I get the pleasure to now talk to Ty about Viewpoint. Can you tell us what your experiences have been like at Viewpoint? And if you had any issues, how were they resolved?
Yeah, overall, my experience at Viewpoint has been generally pretty good. In my 3 years, I've developed very strong bonds with the few Black staff members there. And in becoming close with them, I've been able to voice my opinions and issues of race and injustice and how it's dealt with within the Viewpoint community, and we're able to inspire change. But for the most part, many of the issues were dealt with hastily rather than, trying to actually incite action against these injustices that we're facing. And some of the consequences haven't been serious enough, in my opinion. I mean, allowing students to walk away from things like stating racial slurs and micro and macro aggressions with a slap on the wrist isn't going to allow for change in the long run. And I see that we frequently will say, oh yes, we acknowledge that you're feeling this way about something that was said or about how someone made you feel, but in the long run, we're not really seeing change because it keeps happening in our community, and it's not benefiting anyone. I understand that, like, yes, if we can all come together and we can recognize that this is happening, and we can allow the people that are doing the things that are providing for more injustice and more racism, more prejudice and micro and macro aggressions in our community, if we can let them know that this is not okay, this has been happening for years, for centuries, and it needs to end. If we can finally get through to these people and finally allow for consequences towards their actions, we can finally incite some change and allow for Viewpoint to feel like a safe community for all of their students.
Thank you, Ty. Thank you. Really well said. Next, we'll go to Calabasas High. Leah Winter. Leah, I know you recently sent out a survey to all students at Calabasas. What are the ASB's next steps in inclusivity or bring about inclusivity at Calabasas High School?
So the survey I created incorporated all forms of prejudice on campus, race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, and so on. And I wanted students to really have a chance to share their personal experiences and opinions, because I think most students are fully aware of the prejudice that makes up our campus culture, but I do think administration and staff seem like relatively unaware and think that it's a rare occurrence. But the results of the survey definitely disprove that misconception. And a panel of students and I actually recently talked to administration about like the steps that we can take as a school towards eradicating racism on campus and being anti-racist. So Anahita already mentioned assemblies. So we don't want to do assemblies only during Black History Month. I think it's important that it's brought into the beginning of the school year so students can really start educating themselves, because the root of the issue is ignorance. Students are ignorant to how their words and actions make other students feel, and they're ignorant to what is honestly morally correct. And I think that ASB also can really do a better job celebrating Black History Month and celebrating Black history throughout the year. And that has to do with like revamping the curriculum. I know the English and History department we're already discussing doing that. We also were thinking of we have a KYOTV, it's a film segment that's part of ASB, and we wanted to do like a documentary series where students can share their experiences anonymously, like almost similar to the Instagram account Layla was talking about. Just so students in the beginning of the year realize how their words and actions make other people feel. Because, I mean, really, ASB isn't administration, so we can't necessarily reprimand students, but we really would like to show how the students feel and express students' concerns and be the voice of the student body, and also help educate students, because the students are the root of the issue for culture.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Were you going to say something, Alicia?
No.
Okay. Next, you've heard a lot already today. We have a great school system, but Dr. Dan Stepanowski, I've got a couple questions for you, and feel free to fill in anything you'd like. But how will the cultural proficiency course offered to staff translate in the classroom coming up?
Thanks, Councilmember Shapiro. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. And, one of the most important things for a leader to do is to listen, stop, listen, and reflect. And I appreciate this conversation. We use the term cultural proficiency often, but I think it actually speaks to many of the issues that are being brought up right now. I mean, what is cultural proficiency? It's the lens for examining one's work and one's relationships. More specifically, it's the policies and practices of an organization, values and behaviors of individuals. So that is a critical thing for us to continue to work on and build capacity within our staff. Specifically, the class is a class in partnership with UCSB, and it's a leadership class on social justice. We have all of our administrators in it, a number of our board members. I think the majority of the board members are on it as well, and about 40 of our staff are taking it this summer, and we'll continue to offer. It uses Glenn Singleton's Courageous Conversations About Race, which is a tremendous book. I'm in the middle of reading it right now. Awesome read out there. And it's, again, designed to touch upon many of the issues brought up here. Explore and dialogue about issues of bias, implicit, explicit, social justice, racism in schools. Participants are going to explore their implicit biases and reflect on how those impact their actions in the school system. And the course will focus on fostering interracial dialogue, developing racial consciousness, creating safety for race-based conversations, and understanding privilege. And ultimately, the final assignment will be a personal action plan the staff will bring back to their school or their site. So we're an organization designed for learning. We got into this because that's a great tool for change. I appreciate expanding and being uncomfortable and learning and growing and listening, and the staff is doing that as well. So it's 9 sessions this summer. We just completed number 1, and the next one will be on Wednesday. So I look forward to it moving the needle with the staff.
Okay, thank you. You've heard already today, since we're all listening, there are issues relating to racism which have occurred at the school. What can students do? What things, other than a first step of talking to a teacher or counselor, what things can students do? And what steps should they take if they feel there are issues relating to racism?
Sure, I mean, it's along with any school safety issue. or public health issue, see something, say something. Tell a trusted adult as soon as possible. And I've got to build the capacity in my team to be responding appropriately. Students need to use their voice, lift their voice, and be engaged. And that goes for their entire lives. And so I'm excited to see these students engaged, and the leadership for ASB. This is a tremendous focus area for them. But council members, you know, there's been times in our elections we've had 8% turnout. We need people involved and engaged and running for offices, but at a minimum, voting as well. So lifting, raising voices, participating, meeting with administration, meeting with me, discussions, and my team is on a path of listening and growth.
Okay, and third and final question for you. What steps can be taken in the schools to make students in this area more accepting of racial and economic diversity?
And a couple of students have mentioned this today, and it's spot on. First of all, we can examine our curriculum, our core literature, and that is occurring. There's all kinds of books that can be used. The Hate You Give, I've read that one, it was phenomenal. But is our curriculum and our offerings and our literature diverse? Is it representing viewpoints? Is it challenging our students on these critical issues of racism, bias, privilege? Are we building the capacity in our students and staff to have constructive conversations around really complex and difficult issues? That's part of it. Our curriculum council is dedicated to that work. I think a few of the students mentioned the teachers are part of it as well. And you know, we're excited by that work. We also have a credentialing program for administrators. And in the credentialing program, we're the only school district in the state that has it. There's a number of books that we're looking at. This is my next book that I'll be reading, White Fragility. You know, it examines all kinds of issues associated with racism and privilege. And then finally, my third book for the summer is Teaching to Transgress. This is all about the power of education and learning to create meaningful change in our culture and society. And schools are uniquely positioned to be levers of positive movement within our society. And I'm excited to be a part of that.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
No, I just wanted to add that for people in the community watching, this was put on by the City of Calabasas in partnership with the Mayor's Youth Council. And as a city, we have many partnerships, one of them being LVUSD, Viewpoint, Lost Hill Sheriff Station, and lots of other public and private agencies. But the city itself does not make decisions that impact the school. So I think it's really great that representatives from LVUSD and Viewpoint were open to this conversation. So I just want to say thank you. I mean, these are hard conversations to have, but we have to start somewhere. And during all of the events a few weeks ago, a resident reached out to me and she said, as a community, we need to do more. So it's hard to hear that we're not doing enough, but we all admit that this is just a first step. So we'll continue speaking, but just so everyone understands that there's a lot of questions coming in our chat about the school district. And I know those will be viewed by Dan and his team, but we're also going to focus what we can do as a community at large outside of the schools too. Schools are a very important part of the community, but we have law enforcement, we have city council, we have a whole cohort of people on here that want to hear from you and questions. So David, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you. A different viewpoint, pun intended. We have LaRonda Grates. LaRonda, since you were hired in your specific capacity at Viewpoint, what educational programs have you developed or helped develop that educate Viewpoint students on diversity?
Thank you, David. First of all, let me start by saying that I've been working in independent schools and in education for 22 years. And it's sad to hear the stories that our students are expressing today. And I can co-sign and say that they are not new. To the young lady who talked about how the challenge of making change within schools, whether we're private schools or public schools, some of the challenges that come along with that are just numbers, sheer numbers. It's very difficult for our schools to make progress when our Black community is such a small part of a school system. And so I also saw a question that said, when we're talking about Black, we're also we don't just mean Black people. There are Black and brown people who are also impacted negatively by racism and the different ways that they are seen as othered. There are people who are identify as members of the LGBT community who are also seen as othered. So I have dedicated my career for 22 years to trying to work and be a part of the solution. Number one, listen to the students. They are the ones who are living and have these experiences. Once we hear their experience, we have to believe them. And then for the students, we have to partner with them very much like this conversation. We have to make sure that we bring them on board to help offer us solutions. But we, at the beginning of our school year, and this is my first year at Viewpoint School, but at the beginning of the school year, we brought the administration in to meet with our Black Student Union, for instance, and asked them. And one of the things that came out of that conversation, the students said that they are tired of constantly telling us what the problems are, and we as adults are not doing anything about it. So we had an all-school assembly that addressed the use of the N-word. It is in our handbook already. Our guidelines are already established and developed about our language and the words that we just cannot accept. Now, as we're trying to undo all of the things that have been happening for years in our schools, it's gonna take time. And so we're asking our students to believe in us. A reporting system is necessary. We have to be able to react and respond and make sure that they understand and keep them in the loop. Communication is key. Keep them in the loop so that they understand that we are doing something about it. We don't, however, throw our students out. You know, young people, this is a developmental phase for you. And so you are allowed to make mistakes. As long as it's not egregious and it's a continual mistake, then we try to work to restorative justice is what we're trying to work with as well. So those are kind of some of the things we've started with our faculty, just as the school. I mean, this has been a crazy year for me to start to come to Los Angeles, but it's still good. The sun still shines every day, thankfully, almost every day. And so what we have been doing since school got out, we hired Dr. Derek Gay, who to come in and train our administrative team around issues of diversity. He is a consultant, a nationally known consultant who actually, if you saw the town hall for Sesame Street, he was one of the consultants that is their advisor for that program. And to talk to us about the impact of being or dealing with racism and white supremacy. And we will continue to do that and just continue to try to undo some of the lessons that have been going on for years.
Wonderful. So true. Not your answer is wonderful. And 2020 has been a trying year for all of us, any of us, from young to not so young. But we're taking steps moving forward and making smart decisions here, hopefully. Do you think your position at Viewpoint, which sounds like you have hit the ground running, is going to be a sign of trends for other educational institutions as well in the future?
Absolutely. And again, probably 10 years ago, a position like mine would have never existed in schools, right? And so we are making progress in terms of if you hire someone that's responsible. I mean, again, my title, Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Life. I want to focus on making sure that all of our families feel like they belong in the school. And that's K through 12. Okay, so, and I sit at the senior administrative level. So it's important that I have enough authority so that when I walk into a space, if I'm talking to a teacher or a department chair or a parent even, that they understand that I speak as a representative of the school. And we are doing our work internally, and we are making a commitment. The Board of Trustees made a commitment to make a position such as mine so that I can focus full time on making sure that our school is as inclusive and build a community that reflects what our values are.
Thank you very much.
Great. Now, Audley, I'm going to ask you some questions. Having gone through issues of protest in the 90s in England, how is the culture that you see now different from your experience in the past? And if you can just add, what do you think how do you think change will come?
Thank you. So, yeah, so 20 years ago, over 25 years ago, you know, I witnessed police brutality, and it almost cost me my life. I saw police arresting a member of the public unprofessionally. Back then, there were no phones, couldn't record it. So I complained to them from my car and ended up going to the police station, following them as a citizen to complain through the front door. And, you know, I was arrested, assaulted, had that chokehold that they talk about, the chokehold. 10 officers took me from the lobby in the front desk and, you know, brought me behind, beat me mercilessly because I had the cheek to go through the front desk to complain about them arresting somebody. And, you know, I easily beat their charges. They charged me and my friend with all these different charges, easily beat them in court, and was able to have a civil case where I was, you know, paid compensation, but nothing was happened to those officers. They were still able to keep on the beat, doing the same things that they'd done. The big thing is there was no accountability. I'd done a press interview and I spoke about there needs to be accountability. And just like you talk about criminal reform with reoffending, if you have a police officer that does that, the propensity for them to reoffend and continually to do that unless they're stopped. You've seen it in the George Floyd case. That officer had many cases before of police brutality. Same as my case, the officer who strangled me and almost took my life. 3 years later, he finally got arrested for assault and he was sentenced to 9 months. So it continues to happen when you don't make the things that you're supposed to do. 25 years later, we are still seeing chokeholds, people dying at a higher rate, people of color, Black people and brown people dying at a higher rate than what we represent in the population. So it's not okay. You know, George Floyd's death was not okay. And I'm so like overjoyed in my heart because the kids right now, the kids are so woke, they're so awake, they're so, because it can't just take the Black community. The Black community knows that this has been going on since the beginning of time. We're fed up, we've had enough. But now what's so encouraging is that non-Black, the white community are also out there protesting, out there saying, look, enough's enough. And that's why everybody's listening, because the Black people have been complaining for years. So what I think is so encouraging right now is that the forum that we're in, when I complained 25 years ago, there was a big movement. But this movement right now it seems different, it feels different. So I feel change is gonna come. We have not, I mean, 99% of the officers from 2003 to 2019, 99% of policemen that have been involved in killings of Black people, not one of them have been charged. This year is the first time we are seeing change. You've had the killers of George Floyd and also Rashad Brooks have been charged. You haven't seen that. So I think we're in a critical moment, which I'm excited about. And I think everyone should be excited about it, because at the end of the day, this is a human thing. You know, we talk about, you know, the LGBT community. It's about, you know, our civil rights, our human rights. It's a basic right to be able to, you shouldn't be able to get arrested and feel like you're going to lose your life. But that's how the Black population have felt for a long time. So I think the future right now in this culture, in this environment where people are open to change, I think we have an opportunity because it has to be done in terms of enforceable laws that create change. We can talk about it till we've talked about it, but unless it's effective in terms of policy changes, in terms of laws that allows the police to be accountable, that allows our community leaders to be accountable. I mean, I think the kids at Calabasas have been very brave in coming forward, and I commend them, because I've been on that website that they're talking about. I've been into the post and I've read the stories, and I'm horrified that, that they're living this experience 25 years on. And so there has to be change. We cannot do the lip service, because I'm not a person that does lip service. I like to back the talk. And Calabasas, Aurora, Oak Park, this community is a great community. I've been here since 2015, but the part of the community that needs to be changed, we need to look at that in the mirror. Like we say, it's uncomfortable. I'm comfortable being uncomfortable if it leads to change. And that's where we are today. We have to stand up, take notice, or listen to the kids, listen to the Black people who are out there trying to do good and losing their lives. We have to listen and open our hearts and make the changes that's needed to improve society here in America, here in the UK, and across the world. This is the time, it's now. Thank you.
If I could, I'd give you a big hug right now and say thank you for sharing that. But I want to know I'm going to come back to you, but if everyone on this panel could be thinking outside of schools, what could cities do to really make change? We've heard a lot about in the schools, but if the panelists can be thinking about what cities can do and the effects of social media. Everything taking place now, we're seeing in a different view than we saw 20 years ago with social media and how quickly things are happening in real time. So if everyone can think about that. I'm going to move on to Al Harrington. Al, can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I wanted to talk to you about the low number of Black-owned businesses in the community and what we can do about that. And if there's well, you can answer that for part one question, and then I'll come back to the second.
Yeah, I just feel like when you talk about oppression and different things like that, I think it also revolves around opportunity, right? And, what we've seen just, historically, how hard it is for, Black-owned businesses to not only get started, but if they do, actually get going, to get enough resources and support to, keep it around and actually allow it to be successful. In my experience, being a Black, entrepreneur, some of the racism that, I've received in the past is, oh, he's an NBA player, he's a basketball player. What does he know about business? And, when I think about that and, as I dealt with that, there was a time when I used to really take it like really personal, but then I just also, over time realized that, that was just how it was. That's just life. And as Black people, it's very frustrating, right? I think that a lot of times we end up just, taking some of these letdowns as just being the norm, right? And it's just like, that's just how it is. But what I will say is like, we still continue to fight and still continue to be, very creative in ways of, trying to be entrepreneurs and have a big impact on, on the community and even our communities. One of the things that, I get frustrated with just, with Black people a lot of times is we don't really practice group economics. If you look at, the buying power of, or the power of the Black dollar, I think, next year was supposed to be around $1.7 trillion. And, our money only stays in our community for less than 6 hours compared to, some of the other races like, the Jewish people or Asians, there's always there and there for like 10 to 13, 16 days sometimes. So, I feel like there's a lot of things where, we definitely would like, more opportunity, but I think it's also a time for us as, Black people to start to come together, you know what I'm saying? And start, supporting one another so that we can start to have longevity in business.
Thank you. Now we're turning to Captain Chuck Becerra with law enforcement has been in in the front of all of this in recent times. And we wanted to know, are there any policies of the Los Angeles County Sheriffs that will change as a result of events that took place across the country?
Yes. So let me start off by saying, if I haven't said it, that what happened in Minneapolis was horrendous. It's unacceptable. And I say that that our sheriff said that no one at the station nodded their head to say, oh yeah, they didn't justify it at all. We watched it with the same horror as everybody else did. And because of what happened, our sheriff is a very progressive sheriff, has revised our entire force policy. So what happened in Minneapolis was never allowed in LA, and certainly never allowed for the sheriff's department, but we changed our policies anyways. And there's a few details that we're getting, like, they outlawed the carotid restraint for the sheriff's department. All parties on scene must report what they witnessed. But one of the big things that's going to be key from now on into the future, body cams. Our sheriff's department's going to put body cams on everybody, and that is a great thing. It really is. Then secondly is, I want to say that for one, I'm very impressed with the panel here. The questions are fantastic. The answers are even better. And I do want to listen. And then I want to applaud the city leadership here, because for one, right now, the city of Calabasas is the only city doing this. There's Westlake, Agoura, Malibu. I think it'd go a long way if we did it there. But so I applaud that. So specifically as to the policies, our entire force policy being revised and revamped because of this. But we thought it was atrocious too. Everybody did. Oh, and let me add one thing to this. I became a deputy. I became a deputy because of what happened to my family. I was born and raised in San Fernando, California. It's a Hispanic community. I don't know, maybe 30 miles from here, 40 miles from here. And the police, whenever we would call the police, as kids and my family, the police that showed up were ridiculous. And I honestly thought, I know, mind you, I was 9 years old when I look at the officer and go, I know I could do a better job than you, and here I am. So if for the young people watching, if you want to make a change, you just make it one day, meaning one call at a time. Be a deputy. It is or law enforcement. It is a fantastic job. And I know I made a difference. I'm the first Hispanic captain of this station, first Hispanic captain or leader in this region right now. And I think that's gonna bring a lot to the table.
Great. And is there anything else that you want to add about law enforcement working with the youth in this community? I know that the station does a lot.
We do, but I just want to hear the perspective of the youth.
Okay, well, I'm gonna allow the panelists to ask each other questions before we open it to the public. So we can do that when we get there. Thank you so much, Chuck, for everything you're bringing to the station. And next, I'm gonna turn to Marisela Hernandez, who is our city clerk. Mari and I have been talking a lot recently, and with everything going on, we've really spoken about that. Even as a community, a city, we have events year round for everything, but we as a city do not do anything regarding culture. We don't have any events in the community for Black History Month. We do at the library, but not as in terms of city events. And so I wanted to ask you, Mari, what ideas do you have to celebrate diversity in municipal government?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to thank everyone. Everyone participating here. This is amazing. Conversation is great, and the questions and responses are awesome. So I'm also the first Hispanic city clerk in the city of Calabasas. So anyway, so my idea to celebrate diversity in the city, I'm talking the city of Calabasas, will be to host open houses, maybe for, and I'm gonna pick September because that's Mexico's Independence Day, and that's where I'm from. To have an open house and so we could display historic information regarding of how in Mexico gained its independence. We could involve the library, we can invite the community so they can learn from all the different nationalities, and that will be in September. In February, of course, we will celebrate Black History Month and so on and so forth. So I think an open house about approximately 2 hours. Invite the library to give us the resources and the historic information that we need. We could play music related to the, I guess, ethnicity or the group that we're celebrating, even serve some food and decorate accordingly. So I think that will be a great way to celebrate diversity.
Thank you, Mari. Thanks for being a part of this. So I'm going to try this right now and hopefully it's going to work. But I know some of the panelists want to hear from other panelists. So if you want to ask each other a question, if you could just raise your hand. I know that Chuck had a question that he wanted to ask. And then as a panelist, if you can just raise your hand to respond. We're going to see if this works. It's always tricky learning all of this via Zoom. So Chuck, do you want to start? I know you wanted to ask a question to the other panelists. And then once he asks that questions, if the panelists can just raise their hand to answer.
Yeah, so the perfect, what we have here is perfect scenario in that because I'm new here, my boss, I could tell my bosses no all day long. I could push them aside. So what do you want to see regarding your sheriff's department? Because we are your sheriff's department. What would you like to see?
So would anyone on the panel? Audley, do you want to try to, Audley, if you want to unmute?
Sure. I mean, for me personally, and just collectively in this department, and even if you spread it out into the regional and international, it's just accountability. I think that's the big thing that was missing 25 years ago. And that's the big thing that's now on the table. If just as a parent, I have to teach my kids about being responsible. And if they step over the line, there has to be accountability for their behavior and actions. And that's the bottom line. And if the police force, we need a police force, 100% we need a police force, but they have to be accountable. And if you step over the line, if we see that there's measures in place that you can't step over the line, and if you do, whether that's you lose your job, you lose your pension, you have to go before a criminal court, just like everyone else, because even the president can be impeached. So it tells you that we're all accountable. And I think if that happens, I think that would go to some way to kind of healing some of the divisions that are currently in place.
Great, thank you. And Sammy raised his hand as well.
Yes. I feel like this issue goes beyond the police force and law enforcement and really the justice system as a whole. And I feel like that needs almost a complete revamping of how things are conducted, because we can obviously go into individual and anecdotal experiences about, well, this was something that happened that was positive, or this was something that happened that was positive. But when you look at the data, when you look at the statistics, for example, in DC, the population, the Black population of DC is 25% greater than the white population, but Black people were 400% more likely to be stopped by the police than white people. And the disparity increases to 1,465% for stops which led to no warning, ticket, or arrest, and 3,695% for searches which led to no warning, ticket, or arrest. This is something that goes much deeper than revamping policies and codes of conduct. This is a systemic issue. This is an issue that goes beyond a specific precinct or a specific office. This is the entire system. This is the entire system that needs a reform, that needs revamping in a larger context. When you look at police occupying different communities, it is supported that less police occupation in a lot of communities actually lead to a better outlook on police officers and law enforcement. Whereas if you look at inner city situations where there is a lot of police occupation, the outlook on police is very negative. It's almost a militia in regard to how they patrol inner city areas. So once again, it really is the reformation of the entire system rather than these very little changes.
Thank you. Do any other panelists? Leah?
I just had a question. When, let's say someone calls the police, I feel like the police officers that always come tend to be armed. And I'm not sure why they are always armed, especially if it's non-violent. I just think that's a bit intimidating and gives kind of like a power complex to police officers, to which they just have the ability to end someone's life very easily. And I think that they're the ones bringing weapons onto the scene most of the times. And I just think, like, is there any way to like change that in policy, like more like bring a social worker or someone that's part of the office that's specialized to work with a social case or like domestic issues?
That's a great question, and I'm going to circle back to that, Leah. But Sammy, I want to say a few things. You're right. The entire police department or nationwide has to be reformed, but I can't speak to what's happening in Washington. I can only speak to what's happening in our department. I think your answers are brilliant, by the way, Sammy. I think you make a fantastic deputy sheriff, by the way. So if you want to do that, please see me. I may even nudge you to that. Leah, all officers by law have to be armed. So it's just we show up because calls are inherently dangerous. You know, people die on both ends. Police are shot on the number one killer of police is not a random shooter or a sniper. It's a domestic violence call. So all officers by design and by law are armed. But bringing a social worker, it would be a good idea, but it would mean that we would need hundreds of social workers at the station at any given time to deploy with the officers. That makes sense? So right now we have 160 deputies that deploy out of Malibu Los Hills Sheriff Station. And they're spanned out 180 miles from here to Chatsworth, from Malibu to Chatsworth. At any given time, they're handling 20 calls a shift. As a matter of fact, that's an underestimate. So, and I'm trying to figure out the last shooting we had, if you remember, was in Malibu. You know, a deranged man that was off his medication charged deputies with a knife. But it is an interesting idea. No guns.
Thank you. Ty?
This might be a loaded question, but I was wondering, in the midst of everything going on with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the protests, I was wondering, is there anything going to be done towards Mitrice Richardson's case? Because there is a lot there that we do not know about, and there is a lot that had happened in that case that the people want to know, and I think that it should be open. So reopened. Is there anything being done about that right now?
Well, it's currently still being reinvestigated. The sheriff reopened the case 4 or 5 months ago. So it's still being reinvestigated.
And Ty, just so you know, there was a press conference at the sheriff's station and representatives. I was there along with some other representatives from the city.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And are there any other questions on this one? And then we will, let's see, wait, Sammy, you had your hand up? And then I'll go to Layla. And then I want to make sure we have time. We have a lot of questions from members of the public.
I'd like to just circle back to what Leah said about officers being armed. I think it's more so guns being pulled in certain situations that don't warrant that, rather than being armed in general, because a lot of officers have knee-jerk reactions to different issues. A lot of, even when we're talking about George Floyd, was prompted the officer to use violent and brute force was because he felt, quote unquote, threatened. So I feel like the definition of what constitutes a threat should be changed in that culture of what is threatening and what isn't threatening, going back to the implicit bias of seeing African-American people as more dangerous should be reevaluated. But the statistic I read from Washington, D.C. was just to give greater context. But one of the comments in the Zoom mentioned someone named Dimas Diaz Jr., who was...
Oh, you know what? We're going to wait to go through those. And
Yes.
Those questions have actually already been sent to the station. So yeah, I'm going to ask those when we go forward. But a lot of the questions have already been sent to Chuck and his team. So
Okay.
yeah.
Of course.
Okay.
just to wrap it up, I feel like there is obviously going to be issues that on a grander scale, but I feel like, and there really isn't a lot of people who can, on this panel specifically, who can constitute the grander change. But just to throw this out into the ether, I feel like reallocating funds from the law enforcement and funneling that into education systems and communities, I feel like that would be much greater than just policy reform.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else on the panel have any questions for anybody else on the panel? And then we're going to turn to the public. Layla?
Yes, I do love that social worker idea. I think that should be implemented, but I know that it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of change for all of that to happen. So I think right now, the sheriff's department needs to be focused on going above and beyond to make sure that people of all colors, all creeds feel safe in this community. I've had family members who have felt unsafe, and it's very personal to me in our own community. And it's the difference of, am I going to go to the sheriff department if I feel like I'm in trouble, or is that going to make me feel more unsafe? And I don't think anyone should feel like that for our in our community. So I think it's really important that you make it clear, and like just so clear, that we will be safe coming to you, and whatever changes happen, they happen coming forward.
Great, thank you. I'm going to read some questions in the chat. And there's a lot, and we're not going to have time to get to all of them. We've received some questions that have come in that have already been sent to Dan and his team and Chuck and his team. So if you don't hear your question and you emailed them earlier, a lot of the questions have already been sent to the responsive agencies. Okay, let's go through this. I am curious to hear, let's see, hold on, wait. I guess this is a question for Dan. Who would a student go to if they feel that their teacher or somebody in a leadership capacity is part of the problem?
Sure, great question. Need to go to administration. We've got brand new assistant principal joining the team, Dr. Logan Fox, and brand new principal, Ms. Sarah Exner. And their official first day is Wednesday. So if you have a concern with a teacher, then we'll get a hold of an assistant principal. If you have a concern with assistant principal, or any of the directors, or myself, the entire school district is listening. And of course, you can reach out to board members as well. They are public officials and care deeply for supporting our students.
Okay, and here is a question. Thank you for this important conversation. Very impressive panelists. What do you think is the part that faith communities could play in elimination of racism in our society? Does anyone here want to take a stab at that one? About what our faith leaders could do to help?
I'll try.
Okay.
So I think one of the things most faiths, their foundation is love. Right. And so I think we have not, but we also know that there's an expression that says the most segregated hour in our week is 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, because we go to different spaces where we worship. And so for religious communities, I think one of the things that you can do is to try your best to change that. If your synagogue or your church is only has one race in it, you should try to partner with someone's either a different religion or the same religion that has a different race. And that proximity is something that you need to try to we've got to try to change that and make sure that we are listening. I am a member of a church here in LA, and my pastor, once after the George Floyd incident happened, he really started to focus on what we say as calling in his friends who are of different races, even who are of different religions, and asking them what they are doing to make sure that racism, that they are in their church, anti-racism, as a religious person, what are you doing about racism in your religious organization? And so that's very important. I mean, we saw a lot of that after 9/11, where the Muslim faith, they were kind of targeted, right? And so we want to make sure that that's not happening. And you have to do this work intentionally. It can't be done just you're a nice person and you smile at you've got to try to build relationships as people. We've got to try to work and come together. And I just want to make a point to say that someone mentioned that we are in Calabasas, we are on Chumash land, and to honor and bring the Native American community into this space as well, because those who are indigenous, this is their land, and we rarely bring them into these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question came in that for the Black students on this panel, what would you say to a Black family looking to move to Calabasas? What would your advice be? Ty?
I think that's a great idea. It's a very tight-knit community here in Calabasas, and for the most part, everyone seems to look out for each other. But I would just, if it were me, I would tell my kids, hey, you might want to be aware of the fact that there aren't that many Black people in this community, and you might have to prepare yourself for certain conversations you're going to have. Like if one of your classmates makes the comment based out of ignorance, not trying to hurt your feelings or anything, but you just have to be aware that there are certain conversations you might have to have due to the fact that it is a predominantly white neighborhood. But I don't shun the idea of moving a Black family into Calabasas. I think it's great. For me personally, moving into Calabasas was a great way for me to learn how to communicate with others on topics like this. I think it really helped my ability to, get uncomfortable and have these conversations because they're so important. So I think that in many ways it is a beneficial tool, moving your family here. And I wouldn't not recommend it, but I would recommend it.
Great, thank you. Sammy? Oh, wait, I'll go to Layla. I didn't see it. Your hand was up, and then I'll go to Sammy.
Thanks. I think I would say we have to be very careful when it comes to that because, and I'm not meaning this in an ill way to any of the community of Calabasas, but I think a lot of the racism and prejudice we see is mental. It's like a mental game, especially for someone like me who is a young African-American girl who is petite. I might not be having altercations or getting into fights, or I might not have a problem with law enforcement, but there's a lot of microaggressions that are going on and things under the surface, and it's bigger than just having a festival or having a party. It's a underlying issue. And I think we need to be aware of that coming into the community. And I think if anyone were to come right now, I think they would have to be active in fighting for change and actually seeing that change. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take people who haven't spoken and then I'll come back to you, Sammy, okay? Anahita?
Hi, yes, for this question, I would just say for me, I've lived in this area my whole life. So this is kind of all I've ever known. But one thing that I will parallel my experience to is I go to UC Berkeley currently, and I would say that it's one of the most anti-Black places that I've ever been in my life, because I think just ways that administration and the community feel like it's okay to make certain like racist comments or kind of dismiss things that Black students say. And just comparing it to Calabasas, I would say that if I were to recommend a Black family to come to this area, I think I would, just because although I've experienced things that were racist and discriminatory, I feel like it can be a lot worse. And that's not to say that Calabasas doesn't have its issues, but it's just to say that I feel like people in Calabasas are more willing to work toward being anti-racist and work toward making Black people feel more comfortable in this community. So I think like overall, I would recommend a Black family to move here. Also, the education is really wonderful. And I think that's another thing that so often Black individuals in this country they don't have, they're not on an equal playing field with other people. So when you have such a great educational system or as LVUSD, I think it's important to take that into account when moving as well.
Great, thank you. Sammy?
Everyone perfectly touched on the racial disparity in Calabasas, and I wanted to give the perspective of someone who has seen more of the socioeconomic sides of living in Calabasas. I feel like everything is, because obviously there is amazing opportunities, and I've had a lot of great opportunities here at Calabasas, but it is incredibly expensive, almost in a ridiculous and egregious way. There are so many things that just are not attainable in regard to in a socioeconomic standpoint. If you're moving to Calabasas, you probably have money, so that's a given. But if on the off chance that you are on the lower rung of the economic side, it's best to look out for the fact that everything is incredibly expensive, and you'll probably struggle a little bit.
Let's go to, see, hold on. There are a lot of questions. So whatever we don't get to, we will be sent to, well, I guess while I'm going through these, I want to hear from the panel, what can city leaders do? You've given a lot of advice to school leaders, but as the mayor and to our city council members, what could we do? It's not just about events that it's been said, but what can we do? I mean, this is a start. We've had a lot of community residents listening in, but what can we do? And your hand is up. Anahita?
Hi. Yeah, so one thing that I think that the city could do, I know that when I was younger, I used to go to the Calabasas library and have like books read to me. I'm not sure if that's something that's still done, but I think that if we do still have sessions, I mean, of course, after coronavirus and it's safe to be in bigger groups, but if we still do have sessions like that where there are books being read to children, I think that there should be a special emphasis placed on books that, kind of like teach children to be anti-racist and just teach children to be accepting of other cultures and different people. And I think also another thing I know that the city puts on is the Calabasas Film Festival. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure exactly how, getting people to showcase their work for that kind of, I don't know the process of it, but if there's a way to reach out to Black filmmakers and kind of just show support from the community so that they would have a place to showcase their art, because I think so often Black artists don't feel support in communities. So I think that's also another way to be supportive.
That's a great suggestion. And we work very closely with the Calabasas Film Festival. So thank you. I really appreciate that. Is there Audley?
Yeah, I think, the culture of an organization is the heart of the organization. So I think, in terms of diversity, if we look on when people are coming for job interviews, I don't know how many staff are on the board of Calabasas in terms of like employment. I know there's a lot of staff in terms of, Black and brown. I think more opportunities. I think one of the things that struggle for people trying to climb the social ladder is trying to elevate their skill sets in terms of getting job opportunities. And sometimes that's not available for them because of their color. And it's not something that's deliberate, it's subconscious. So I think to see more diversity in a lot of these, mostly, where there's mostly white neighborhoods, I think would be good in terms of city officials and more government positions.
Thank you. Layla?
I think it's very important for all of us to be more responsive when it comes to racial issues in the community. I know that there are different divisions and not everyone can make a big impact in every single division, but using your voice and saying this is wrong and this needs to change means a lot, especially if it's coming from the mayor or from the school district leader. So it makes a big difference when people are speaking up and using their voices.
Great, and I know Councilmember Shapiro wanted to add something about the Calabasas Film Festival.
Thank you, Mayor Weintraub. I just wanted to say that was a great comment. Each year, the Calabasas Film Festival, the directors have been putting in place films showcasing and referencing diversity, whether it's actors, directors. That's from year one. And the Student Film Festival, which occurs on Sunday and has over 100 applications from all over any high school or any school student that presents it, is something they also encourage as well. But the film festival each year, they have worked and created incredible films showcasing artists, directors, producers. From the first year, Antoine Fuqua, I'm saying it wrong, I'll get in trouble, to their annual celebration last year was the film that showed directly on Netflix. It was fantastic. Also, there was quite a few. So if you look back, and we can put you in contact with them, anyone can, because they're looking for students and adults to help be involved from our community. So that would be great.
Thanks, David. And probably going to be our last question. I'm going to ask Dan and LaRonda. Would the schools, this is another question that came in, would the schools consider an anti-racism campaign like they have for anti-bullying? Either of you can, I'll hear from both of you. So whoever wants to go first.
I think it's a terrific idea. I mean, I think that gets back to something that Audley said so well, which is changing hearts. And changing hearts and minds is, where the schools can be most powerful as a platform of anti-racism. And that's, through the literature we share, through the curriculum we adopt, through the cultural proficiency of the staff, through our interventions if and when students make bad choices. So that's an exciting place for us. And I see great work for us ahead on that endeavor.
And I appreciate everyone responding to people messaging in. So thank you.
I agree with Dan. One of the things in my profession, it's kind of food, fun, and festivals that's just a base level. That's where we get started. And then trying to change hearts and minds, that's a little bit more challenging. As the police officer said, the captain said, socio-emotional development and learning around how the heart impacts the way we learn in our schools, our counselors, and people who are concerned about the wellness of our students, very important. Making sure that when it talks about anti-racism, and again, that's just a new term, and I hate to be skeptical. It's just a kind of it's just a new term that's kind of, if we don't call it racism, if we don't talk about white supremacy, we are not going to change this. This is going to go away just like so many other things have. Our biases, the way we see things, the way we are living our lives, and who we are interacting with. Thank you for the students who brought up socioeconomic diversity. Mental health support is very necessary, and our schools have got to invest in those things in addition to changing our curriculum and having places for our students to go when they have problems. And so we're working on that.
Great, thank you. And actually, Layla?
Just to add on to that and give a comment, I think when it comes to these programs that we introduce into schools, I remember being in school and you know, going through these campaigns and just, you know, you swipe to the side. It's like, it's a joke to some people, and it can come off as, you know, corny, hokey. But one thing that didn't, and that really stuck with me for a lot of years, it was the drunk driving campaign that Calabasas does all the time. I think we really need to take a look at that and make sure that whatever campaign or presentation we're putting out there is just as serious as that one.
Great, thank you. So we're running out of time, and I promised all our panelists that we would end on time. So I know for me as the mayor of this community, this has been so eye-opening, just hearing especially the students' experiences. And I know that everyone on here is committed to changing the experiences and doing our part. I know that myself and my city council colleagues have an open door to all members of our community, and that is for the students too. I know many of our students are involved in the Mayor's Youth Council and other things, but please share your concerns with us as well. As I said from the beginning, we don't have any jurisdiction over what happens in the schools or what happens with law enforcement, but it's really important for us to know what's happening in the community. And we all talk, and I know that my colleagues at the schools are probably shocked to hear this as well, but we're a team here in the city of Calabasas, and we want to be a part of solutions. So when you hear things, when you come up with ideas, please reach out to us. But I know there's been a lot of focus on our schools and law enforcement. So I just want to allow, if they want, either Dan, LaRonda, or Chuck to say anything in closing, if they choose. If not, they don't need to.
I just want to say thank you. And as you said, your door is open. For the parents that are on this call, please get involved. If you are concerned, or even if you don't know, whether you're at our private school, and we need to hear your voices. Your voices are important to us. Your children are going through, my children went through independent schools, but I was public school educated. So I didn't feel like I understood kind of the system. Please don't let that slow you down. Show up at your school, get involved in the school, let people know that your child has an advocate as an adult. And even if you're working, shoot us an email and we will respond.
And somebody on this call mentioned just how important it is for your voice to be heard through voting. And through our Mayor's Youth Council, we're going to be working on voter outreach to the young people in our community. So in closing, if Adam or David or anyone else wants to say something, this is the opportunity. David?
Just very quickly, thank you to everybody on the panel. Thank you, Alicia, and also Adam and the Mayor's Youth Council for this, and everybody listening in. We didn't lose too many, which is a good thing in any Zoom call. This is really important, and it's a beginning. It's a conversation, and we're starting it today. Powerful comments, powerful discussion. Our doors are open, and we are listening. And I'm just so impressed because I believe things will change from our youth. We have a voice, we'll offer it. Our doors are open, but the youth are really the ones who have the power to change things going forward, including please vote, please register going forward, no matter who you vote for, please vote. Thank you.
Adam, do you want to say anything before we sign off?
I just want to thank all the panelists for coming today and all the viewers who are viewing and all the people who have asked very amazing questions. For the Mayor's Youth Council, we want to continue the dialogue for many years to come, and we are going to implement change from all the topics we talked about and all the ideas, and we are happy to continue the dialogue.
So again, just thank you everyone for being a part of this. There will be many more conversations to come on this, so stay tuned, and just thank you everyone for giving us your time. So we will end this meeting or Zoom session. So thank you to everyone. Much appreciation.